The snakes pose a significant threat.
A python of this size would be quite the voracious predator out here in the Everglades. And what people really worry about is these eating some of the more threatened species like American crocodile hatchlings or the key largo wood rat.
Deep in Florida's Everglades, motion-activated cameras captured something no one expected: a dramatic shift between predator and prey. Once filled with wildlife, parts of the swamp have fallen eerily silent as invasive Burmese pythons devastate native animal populations. But an even darker threat is spreading beneath the surface: a deadly parasite attacking native snakes. Now, hunters, scientists, and native predators are fighting back in surprising ways. Some animals are even learning to prey on the invasive snakes. But is this resistance enough to save the Everglades? Or has the ecosystem already changed forever? The answer begins with what those cameras recorded. The invasion begins. The Burmese python invasion in Florida starts with a perfect storm of natural disaster and human error.
Biologists at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida believe one of their scout Burmese pythons.
In August 1992, Hurricane Andrew slammed into South Florida with sustained winds of 165 miles per hour, wreaking havoc across the region. Among the many damages was the destruction of a reptile breeding facility housing Burmese pythons. The enclosures collapsed, and numerous large snakes escaped into the surrounding wetlands, disappearing into the night with no recovery effort initiated. At the same time, thousands of pet owners found their once manageable python hatchlings growing into massive, uncontainable reptiles. Rather than seeking alternative solutions, many chose to release these exotic constrictors into the Florida Everglades. They believed they were setting the animals free, but in reality, they were unleashing a predatory force that the ecosystem had never seen before. Unlike native predators, Burmese pythons brought a new and devastating hunting strategy to the wetlands. The Everglades, spanning over 1.5 million acres of subtropical wetlands, provides an ideal environment: warm temperatures, high humidity, and an abundant food supply. Native animals like raccoons, opossums, rabbits, and marsh birds had evolved alongside predators such as alligators and bobcats for thousands of years. But a Burmese python, which can grow up to 15 feet and hunt by sensing body heat in total darkness, was something these animals were utterly unprepared for. A raccoon moseying through the Everglades might drift by a coiled python and not really clock any threat, kinda like someone half paying attention while brushing past a garden hose. That kind of stealth plus lethality gave the Burmese python a sharp edge, and then their numbers started climbing in a way that felt almost exponential. A single female can lay roughly 50 to 100 eggs in one clutch, and she keeps them warm, patiently incubating them, kinda like a brooding bird does. Since there weren't many natural controls around, nothing really slowed their expansion. Today, estimates put Burmese pythons in South Florida at somewhere between 100,000 and 300,000 animals, which means they've become apex predators in places where they basically did not exist 2 decades ago. That surge quietly changed the Everglades from something more balanced into a kind of ongoing fight, one where a foreign invader holds the upper hand. Scientists soon noticed the pythons weren't merely living there. They were doing well, and they were eating native wildlife at an alarming pace. Dr. Frank Mazzotti, a wildlife ecologist from the University of Florida, famously compared introducing Burmese pythons into the Everglades to letting wolves roam around a petting zoo. That analogy points at how harsh the damage has been, especially for native mammals, which have dropped fast as this new predator applies constant pressure. The bigger picture is that the ecosystem is losing a quiet yet essential contest, even if you don't see it right away. What started as an invasion that seemed like a local bother has basically turned into a serious ecological crisis. The python's quick spread keeps raising urgent, hard questions about what happens next to native species and whether the Everglades can keep its ecological integrity. Figuring out the scale and where this problem really came from matters a lot, because only then can we fully understand the deeper consequences still waiting to show up. This puzzle would only become clearer with ongoing research and startling discoveries that challenge previous assumptions about Florida's wildlife. Ecological collapse. The presence of Burmese pythons in the Everglades has triggered catastrophic declines in native mammal populations, leading to a silence so profound it has become haunting. Dr. Mazzotti's studies uncovered that raccoon populations fell by an estimated 99.3%. This staggering figure means raccoons, once ubiquitous in the wetlands, are now functionally absent. Other species suffered similarly. Opossums declined by nearly 99%, and bobcats dropped by 87%. One after another, native mammals weren't just reduced. Their populations collapsed. This loss transformed the Everglades' soundscape and ecosystem health. Roads where animals once thrived and required drivers to slow down became eerily empty. Researchers driving these same routes found no animals, no signs of movement, nothing but sawgrass and the hum of engines cutting through unnatural stillness. Wildlife spots that once yielded dozens of unique mammal sightings during short visits had become ghost towns. This silence signifies more than heartbreak. It signals a breakdown of an entire ecological system. The consequences extend far beyond the loss of wildlife. The Everglades act as a natural flood protector and water purifier for millions of people, filtering drinking water and sustaining the regional environment. Ecologists estimate the wetland's economic value at over $31 billion annually. The small mammals the pythons have decimated are not mere inhabitants, but foundational components that maintain wetland functionality. Their extinction threatens to unravel this delicate balance, endangering wildlife and people alike. Efforts to deal with the python issue sort of started with public hunting days like the Florida Python Challenge, where folks pulled out close to 200 snakes during the 2024 go-round. Sure, these contests lift some awareness and remove a chunk of animals, but the numbers really do not. If there are even roughly 300,000 pythons around, then taking out less than 0.1% just barely touches the population, and it certainly doesn't stop breeding. Even with professional hunter programs that began in 2017 and have reportedly removed about 23,000 snakes, there's still that same fast replacement pipeline, like the system keeps refilling. Chasing these reptiles is honestly a rough, nightmarish job. They're master ambush predators, and they often stay perfectly still, blending into vegetation like they belong there. Hunters with experience sometimes call it hunting ghosts, because you're really looking for shadows and shapes that are way too subtle to catch without getting lucky. Tech that's meant to flag thermal signatures, or that is supposed to mimic prey, hasn't done much either. Cold-blooded pythons basically tune their body temperature to the surroundings and ignore robotic decoys just sitting there, waiting. The Everglades is huge, and the sheer landscape scale makes proper surveying and removal feel nearly impossible. Many breeding groups have shifted into the most difficult-to-reach corners, like deep sawgrass areas and tight cypress hammocks, places that humans hardly touch. Veteran hunters say the snakes are adjusting more quickly to pressure than people are adjusting to them. That imbalance creates this invisible plague feeling, where the problem sort of slips under everything, and the crisis keeps thickening. So while the pythons keep chewing through mammal populations from above, there's another threat acting more quietly underneath, spreading among native snake species and making the ecological damage worse, bit by bit. This next challenge reveals that the battle is no longer just with a giant reptile invader, but also involves a deadly parasite unleashed alongside it. The invisible parasite, hidden in the lungs of many native Florida snakes, is a parasite that has slipped under the radar with deadly consequences. Herpetologist Dr. Terence Farrell discovered native snakes such as garter snakes, pygmy rattlesnakes, and eastern diamondbacks, presenting signs of severe respiratory distress. Emaciated, lethargic, with mouths agape due to labored breathing. Necropsies revealed the snake's lungs were clogged with masses of microscopic, translucent organisms visible even while the snakes were still alive. This parasite, known as Rhyeliatiella orientalis, or snake lungworm, originally came into Florida with Burmese pythons. The lungworm and python have coexisted for millions of years in Southeast Asia, where the python's immune system tolerates the parasite without major illness. In Florida, however, native snake species have never encountered this parasite and lack any immune defenses. Farrell compared this to the first contact between isolated indigenous groups and European explorers. Some populations develop resistance, while others suffer catastrophic losses. The lungworm's transmission pathway makes controlling its spread nearly impossible. Infected pythons excrete larvae in their waste, which is eaten by ubiquitous cockroaches in the Everglades. Frogs then consume the infected cockroaches. When native snakes eat these frogs, the lungworm larvae enter their bodies, bore through stomach walls, and migrate to the lungs, where they anchor and multiply. Over weeks or months, the snake's airways fill, causing progressive suffocation, a slow-motion drowning. At minimum, 18 distinct native snake species now carry the lungworm, with infections confirmed as far north as Jacksonville, hundreds of miles from the Everglades. Even more alarming is the recent finding that the lungworm no longer depends on Burmese pythons to complete its life cycle. The parasite has shifted hosts and established a self-sustaining transmission cycle entirely within native snake populations. This means even if every python were removed overnight, the lungworm would persist in the ecosystem through cockroaches, frogs, and native snakes. The Everglades therefore face an unprecedented dual threat. Invasive pythons consume mammals from above, while the lungworm ravages native reptiles from within, undermining the foundation and structure of the ecosystem simultaneously. This biological one-two punch complicates recovery and raises grim questions about the wetland's future. There is a rare glimmer of hope. The Florida cottonmouth snake appears resistant to the lungworm, showing negligible parasite loads even in heavily infected areas. Understanding whatever biological factors grant this resistance could be key to protecting other native species. As the ecological battle rages on, hope lies in uncovering these mysteries and rallying natural as well as human resilience to defend one of America's most precious wetlands. The camera footage that first shocked researchers would prove only the beginning of a long uphill fight to reclaim the Everglades. Failed control efforts. Efforts to control the Burmese python invasion have been ongoing for years.
Hunters the opportunity to win thousands of dollars by removing invasive Burmese pythons from the Everglades,
but have struggled to keep pace with the snake's rapid population growth. The Florida Python Challenge, a public hunting competition, is one of the most visible responses, where participants removed nearly 200 pythons in 2024 alone. Yet, this number barely registers against estimated populations, potentially reaching 300,000. Removing such a small fraction of snakes does little to slow their reproduction or spread. To bolster these public hunts, the state also hired full-time professional contractors who specialize in python removal. Donna Khalil, a well-known python hunter, described nighttime searches as hunting ghosts, scanning headlamps across dense vegetation only to find nothing for long stretches. Then suddenly, a coiled snake appears, perfectly still and blending into the surroundings like a living root. These skilled hunters have taken out about 23,000 pythons since 2017. But even that impressive number likely represents less than 5% of the total population. The sheer scale and complexity of the Everglades make even professional removal massively challenging. The snakes retreat into deep sawgrass and dense cypress hammocks, areas difficult for humans to access consistently. As veteran hunters like Mike Kimmel warn, The snakes are adapting faster than humans can respond, concentrating in the hardest-to-reach places. This strategic retreat makes comprehensive coverage impossible, allowing breeding populations to thrive largely undisturbed. Adding further difficulty, the technology that's currently available has only managed limited success. Thermal drones meant to detect heat clues tend to miss because pythons, being cold-blooded, can blend with ambient temperatures way too well. Robotic prey decoys, created to lure snakes, get basically ignored by these very patient ambush predators who don't really buy the decoy story and instead wait for genuine live prey. The snake's natural hunting routines have stalled a lot of these technical attempts, so managers keep looking for something more effective and more reliable than before. One avenue that still looks promising is the innovative Judas snake program, started by Ian Bartosiak of the Conservancy of Southwest Florida. The idea is to surgically implant GPS trackers into mature male pythons and then release them so they can track and locate breeding aggregations during mating season. This tactic has worked well enough to identify and remove some of the largest breeding females ever logged, focusing directly on the snakes that matter most for population growth. Even so, there's a huge catch. The Everglades is enormous and hard to reach, so Judas snakes can't realistically sweep through enough area to steer the overall population in a meaningful way. And at the same time, python behavior keeps adapting. They retreat deeper into thicker cover to avoid being spotted, so the problem keeps compounding. In practice, hunting turns into a kind of long game, persistence, patience, and changing strategy, again and again. It also feels like a larger realization is forming among hunters and scientists, namely that these snakes may be learning from humans. They sidestep zones with regular human presence and shift their distribution toward places where the risk is lower, or at least less predictable. So each time someone manages a removal success, there's often a matching retreat into environments where detection is far less likely, which adds another layer of frustration to the ongoing effort. While the battle on the ground remains arduous and uncertain, another unexpected front has opened beneath the surface, transforming the fight into a complex, ecological confrontation. Signs of resistance. Despite the growing crisis, there are encouraging signs that nature is beginning to fight back. For years, Burmese pythons had virtually no natural predators in Florida. But recent trail camera footage has captured alligators ambushing smaller pythons and even endangered Florida panthers, stalking them through dense vegetation. Native predators appear to be learning how to exploit the snake's weaknesses. Pythons become slow after swallowing large prey, and cooler weather further reduces their speed, making them easier targets. Researchers have also documented Florida panthers adding pythons to their diet, a behavior few scientists expected. According to National Park Service technician Ian Easterling, these predators are adapting in ways that could gradually reshape the Everglades food web. Another promising development is the return of the eastern indigo snake. Once nearly wiped out by habitat loss, this impressive native species has been reintroduced through conservation programs. Known for hunting other snakes, the eastern indigo is immune to the venom of North America's pit vipers and is powerful enough to overpower many snake species. By late 2023, trail cameras captured wild-born eastern indigo hatchlings for the first time in more than 50 years, confirming the species is successfully breeding in the wild again. Even though adult indigos might have a hard time against fully grown Burmese pythons, they can still go after juveniles, so it's not all doom. Any young python taken out before it gets to full maturity, it basically helps slow down the invasion's quick population surge. Still, there's this big worry that hangs around. Researchers do not yet know if eastern indigo snakes can hold up against the lungworm parasite that's now moving through local snake communities. If that parasite manages to infect the indigos that are starting to recover, it could end up putting at risk one of Florida's most promising natural defenses against the python invasion. The parasite's ability to infect these new hosts could undermine conservation efforts and jeopardize the fragile balance being rebuilt. The battle for Florida's swamps is far from over, and the outcome remains uncertain. The uncertain future. The battle for the Everglades is far from over. Burmese pythons continue spreading across the wetlands, adapting faster than wildlife managers can control them. At the same time, the snake lungworm parasite has broken free from its dependence on pythons and now spreads among native snakes on its own, creating a second major threat. While pythons wipe out mammals above ground, the parasite weakens reptile populations from within, making recovery far more difficult. Scientists have, stumbled on this one pretty encouraging clue. The Florida cottonmouth shows up as naturally resistant to the lungworm, sort of carrying only very small parasite counts. Researchers are hoping that understanding this kind of resistance could someday help shield other native snake species as the outbreak keeps growing. Then there's another reason to stay a bit hopeful, from the eastern indigo snake coming back. Not too long ago, it was almost gone from Florida, but now it's being reintroduced into the wild. Eastern indigos are powerful native hunters. They naturally go after other snakes, including young Burmese pythons, so they could end up being a real ally for slowing the invasion. By late 2023, trail cameras caught wild-born eastern indigo hatchlings for the first time in more than 50 years, which basically confirms the animals are breeding successfully again. Still, the future is kind of foggy. Even though indigo snakes are immune to North American snake venom, scientists don't yet know whether they can also resist the lungworm. And if the parasite starts moving through the recovering indigo populations, that might undo a lot of years of conservation work. Native predators like bobcats, panthers, and alligators have started to prey on pythons too, but mostly in isolated situations. For now, pythons are still the bigger predator, while the lungworm quietly spreads through native snake communities. The Everglades are basically at a crossroads, and what happens next will depend on continued research, ongoing conservation, and whether nature can adapt in time before these invasive problems permanently reshape one of America's most singular ecosystems. The Everglades' fight against invasive pythons and the deadly lungworm is a story of destruction, adaptation, and hope. These forces are challenging one of America's most precious ecosystems in ways few ever imagined. As native predators adjust and restoration efforts continue, the future remains uncertain, but there are still reasons to hope. If you found this story eye-opening, please like and subscribe for more hidden battles unfolding in nature. Then, continue watching by clicking the next video on your screen to uncover another incredible struggle for survival. Thanks for watching.